Welcome to the Spiritualpreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Christian, aka Love Pixel. And in each episode, we sit down with spiritual entrepreneurs sharing their knowledge, wisdom, and tools on their path to authentic success. Let's dive in. What is up, beautiful people? This is Christian from the Successful Spiritualpreneur Podcast. And today we have an extraordinary guest on the show. His name is Sam Kabert, and he is named Silicon Valley's 40 under 40 list at just 31 years old. Sam is a serial entrepreneur turned spiritual seeker. And despite building $1 million business, Sam realized he was unfulfilled and sought a deeper purpose in life. Since 2019, he has embraced a journey of self-discovery, prioritizing mental health, and advocating for soul-life balance. In his book, Soul-Life Balance, he explores life's deeper meanings, inspired by an existential question from his childhood. After hitting rock bottom despite his achievements, Sam found purpose in yoga and meditation, becoming a certified instructor and breathwork facilitator. He now shares his transformative 5-step practice with corporate audiences and private clients, helping others find balance and overcome overwhelm. Please join me in welcoming Sam Kabert to the podcast. Welcome, Sam.
Hey, Christian. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, it's an honor. So tell us a little bit about your path, your journey. How did you get to where you are today? A little bit of background would be much appreciated. And then, I'm excited for all the wisdom you have to share because you seem to me like the person who perfectly balances entrepreneurship with spirituality.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. And thank you so much for having me here. Yeah. So the high level is I'm from the Silicon Valley area, started my first business in college. And then let's see, it was about 7 years to get to the spiritual awakening side. I'd say the first 3 years of entrepreneurship, being 22 to 25 years old, was very rocky and challenging. And am I doing the right thing? And then around years 3 to 5, I started to take off. That was also when I started my first podcast in 2017. And then after that, it's interesting to look back at it because after takeoff, I only really had maybe like 2 or 3 years of the height of it. That's when I was really networking with the who's who of Silicon Valley. I was named at Silicon Valley's 40 under 40 list. I was dating an NFL cheerleader at the time, and I built my company up to $1 million company. And I was on the board of multiple nonprofits, chairing a group called Silicon Valley Young Professionals, and even did an annual event at eBay's headquarters called Pitch Tank, similar to Shark Tank, just our version. So very much like entrenched in hustle culture and entrepreneurship and business and all the things. And then I hit numbing depression in 2019. Around the time I built my business up to a 7-figure business and was named in Silicon Valley's 40 under 40 list. And that's when ayahuasca found me. And after that, it changed everything in my life. I moved out of Silicon Valley, got out of the toxic relationship, started to explore different business endeavors instead of what I was doing, and just went deep down the rabbit hole of spirituality. And then I got really into working with plant and earth medicines and integration, being an integration guide for others. And now I'm a keynote speaker. I speak to corporate about soul life balance and overcoming the overwhelm as well, the title of my new book. And yeah, that's a high level update of what. Oh, and I'm a yoga instructor, breathwork practitioner, and I lead a men's group. So a totally different world than it was 5 years ago, for sure.
Wow, that's incredible. I love how people can just transform in such a short amount of time. Isn't it incredible?
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about your ayahuasca experience. Like, why would you title that as so significant or impactful? Like, I mean, of course, it's a powerful plant medicine, but what about it was like you were ready, something was falling apart already, or you were just like open for change? Like, what? Tell us more about how that point in
Yeah.
life unfolded.
Yeah, I mean, I was at rock bottom, and it was a numbing depression, like I said. So the idea and concept of surrender was absolutely intimidating and scary for me. But at the same time, because I was at that rock bottom, it made it a lot easier to surrender. And even looking back at all of my medicine ceremonies after that first ayahuasca ceremony, like, sure, they've been great, they've been profound, they've been helpful, but sometimes I've looked at them too, like, do I really need to go back to the medicine? Because that first night was everything that I needed, because that was the ultimate place of surrender, because where I was at was so painful. And I remember the purges, and one specifically where I purged out all, it felt like all, but it wasn't all of my like self-hatred and all of my identity. And it felt like I had a flash of my whole life in one purge. And I just remember after purging, just being, and a big smile on my face. And then I laid down and then just went on a beautiful journey from there. And then after that, I was like, wow, if I just experienced that. A lot of people said going into my ayahuasca ceremony, I'd heard like, typical stuff. It's like 10, 12, 15 years of therapy packed into a single night. And for me, it was a lifetime, if not lifetimes of therapy. So that's when I just changed everything in my life and just went down the spiritual path with blinders on, because it was that profound.
So, how can people live as a spiritualpreneur? Like, how can they find this
Hmm.
balance of spirituality and entrepreneurship? Because I personally believe very much that the golden path, as Buddha says, is like that's the path. You know what I mean? It's never one extreme that makes us really flourish. So how can we walk that path?
Yeah, I think it's a lot easier for entrepreneurs than it is for someone that works for a company, because as an entrepreneur, you get to really have that autonomy to choose what you want to do, when you want to do it, and to create your schedule. I know a lot of people that are stuck in corporate, and I just had a friend yesterday where I called him up and he was like, "Oh, I'll call you back in 40 minutes. It's not 5 yet." I'm like, "What do you mean it's not 5?" He's like, I'm at the office. And I'm like, why does that matter? Shouldn't it? He's like, we live in different worlds. I'm like, yeah, we do. Because in a lot of ways, I feel like in corporate, or just being an employee for an organization, we look at time, and it's like a prison sentence, or like, oh, now it's 5 o'clock, okay, you can go home now, as opposed to the work that you've done. Like, hey, do you complete all your work? Sweet, go home. I don't care that's 12 p.m. You're supposed to be here for another 5 hours, but you got your work done, go home. But for entrepreneurs, since we do have that flexibility, it's honestly easy and there's no excuses. And I believe it's really the embodiment of the archetypal energy of yin and yang, or yang, which is the feminine and masculine. And that's why I talk about soul life balance, because soul life balance is a reframe of work life balance, where we realize that both work and life are about outer expression, responsibilities, obligations, how we perceive the world with our five senses. So, okay, no wonder why we're going through this mental health crisis. So instead, let's prioritize our soul first, yin energy, the feminine, our inner world made up of our thoughts and feelings, and then recategorize work as a part of life. So I think for entrepreneurs, it's a lot easier if we can just put our spiritual practices first and not get stuck in hustle culture. Now, this is a practice and it is a balance, because there are so many first time entrepreneurs that kind of come from spirituality and are new to business. And what we see there is it's not so easy for them, because they get stuck in all is love and light and everything is flow and nothing ever gets done, because they're always more in the soul side of the soul life balance. For them, they're going to need to have some discipline and roll up their sleeves. Whereas for people like myself that are like, no, I got this like yang energy, this work thing down, I just need to prioritize like my mental health and my connection to source and my inner world. It's a little bit easier, I feel like, for us. But either side, it's always going to have its challenges. the name of my integration group for people working with plant and earth medicines is called Structured Flow. And you'll notice that everything I do has this like kind of sense of yin yang to it. And right, because we need that structure to have that flow. And I think that's a really important message for so many people in spirituality, because even if you do come from more structure in your life and you're new to flow, we all kind of just veer to everything is flow. It's like, well, you still got to get things done. So how can we have structured flow while we live within the philosophy and framework of soul life balance?
Beautiful. I love that. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what structure flow looks like for somebody who's just not familiar with either of these concepts? Like, how can we have a structure flow?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm huge on working with my calendar, and I've always been someone who it's like, if it's not on my calendar, it doesn't exist. And back when I was in like quote unquote hustle culture, as we'll call it, my business coach back in like 2013 or something was like, put every single thing on your calendar, even your breaks. And I was like, oh man, like that's overwhelming. And then I'd also be like, well, what if I can't do it? If I don't feel like doing it, if it's creative work and I'm not feeling creative or anything like that, he'd be like, it's okay. Just reschedule it. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. So for someone that is very much in their flow and they're like, oh no, I don't like the idea of like using a calendar because I want to base things off of when I feel like doing it. Hey, I see you. Me too. Living here in Santa Cruz, I'm starting to get into surfing more. And not only that, this town is very much like foggy sometimes and sunny other times. And then if I have a day that's packed full of calls or meetings or things I'm doing, but it's beautiful outside and usually it's just foggy, I'm going to be really frustrated because I want to be outside. And the whole reason of me being an entrepreneur is to be able to do what I want to do when I want to do it. So for me, I don't like to have a packed calendar of like commitments to calls and things like that, right? I'll limit them to a few a day. Or other people, it might be like, hey, Tuesdays and Thursdays or whatever it is, I'm going to take calls back to back all day. And then the other days I'll play. That's something that you can work with and see what works best for you. The reason why I bring up surfing is you never know what the swell is going to look like, especially if it's a few weeks out. And now that I've been surfing every day for the past week, coming back from Costa Rica, like it feels amazing. And also like, being now having that flexibility of being like, okay, there is a good swell and this is the good time to go out and I have that space. So that feels good. The other side that I was saying, with the calendar is just realize when you first start working with your calendar, if you don't feel like doing something that's not like a commitment to a client or say a podcast like what we're doing right now or a meeting, you can always reschedule that creative work. You can always reschedule that. So don't be shy about rescheduling it for a time that you do want to do that, because you should not be doing creative work when you're not feeling creative. The output's just not going to be there.
Yeah, I agree. I appreciate that very much, especially since this interview also was rescheduled.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
The perfect example.
Yeah.
So, from your experience, like when would you say, like when did you last follow your intuition over logic in your business?
Can you ask that again?
Yeah, when did you last follow your intuition over
Oh.
logic in your business, and what was the outcome?
Hmm. Oh God, good one. Just last week, I was giving a keynote to a casino, and I knew exactly what I was going to be talking about, what the keynote presentation was going to be about, overcoming the overwhelm and the 6-step breath process. And I had it all mapped out and I was ready to go. And I was coming straight from Costa Rica, men's retreat, flying straight to Arizona from Costa. And I had all day to just like kind of ground back in the US and get ready to present to a corporate demographic. And I really like to do some sort of yoga or meditation or ice bath or just something before I go and present. And I Googled, like, cold plunge near me, and I found this amazing place called Optimize in Tempe, Arizona, that has not only a cold plunge and a sauna, but like, oh, it was like a biohacker's dream with everything they had there. And it was just incredible. I loved it. I had such a good time that morning. But when I was in the sauna specifically, I asked myself, what is it that these people need most? Because I was feeling like the keynote presentation that I was to give that evening was landing a bit flat. And the reason was they brought me in as the closing keynote speaker for their mental health symposium, the first time they are offering it for their employees, because they had 7 suicides last year. And I really wanted to not just have the presentation I planned. I wanted to really see, no, there feels like there's something more here. So I first meditated to just clear my thoughts, and then I reflected on it and allowed anything to come through. And what came through was not only to share my story with suicide, but I literally had a script come through. So I got out of the sauna when I was done with that 20-minute session and went to the compression chair where they put like the compression type things on your legs. And typically in something like this, I wouldn't want to bring my phone out. I'd want to just be, but at this point I'm like, well, I'm working too. So I pulled my phone out, and while it's going away on the compression on my legs, I'm just writing the script out because it's almost being channeled. Then by the time I got back to the hotel, just lay down in the bed, bust out my laptop, wrote out this new script, and then I performed it about 5 times and went over it. And it was about a 7-minute long introduction to the keynote presentation where I was describing, telling the story of when I found my friend hanging himself, hung from the ceiling fan, and how his older brother came and kicked down the door, and it was his older brother was giving him CPR. And this was on the morning of I believe it was 2008, the Super Bowl, the first time Eli Manning defeated Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. And the reason why that's important is because the whole commentary after the game was about how proud of an older brother Peyton Manning must be because he just won his Super Bowl 2 years previous. And this was one of the few Super Bowls in my life where we weren't just raging and partying or whatever. Like, I was in college, I was 19 years old, but we were just around the couch, actually watching the game and watching the commentary afterwards. And the whole narrative was around like Peyton Manning and the Manning family and how proud they must be of Eli Manning defeating Tom Brady. And next thing you know, we get a knock on the door, and it's our friend's older brother. And he's like, where's Pete? We'll call him. And we say he's in his room. Then the older brother, we'll call him Jeff, runs to the room, kicks down the door, and he finds his younger brother hanging himself. So that's the story I told. And after the speech, this woman came up to me and said, she shared with me someone on her team hung himself this past Super Bowl. And not only that, it was her nephew. And we just had like a very profound spiritual moment. And it was in that moment I knew, like, hey, I was listening to my intuition being like, something is off here, because this speech is feeling a little bit flat and it feels like there's something more here. And I called an audible, to use more football terminology, to change the speech last minute and add something new, and it worked.
Wow. That's incredible. Yeah, I love when there's examples in people's life where you really, or where a person really gets to like channel and just like, again, like you surrendered. You just like, you didn't. I feel there's something else. I surrender. I see, open to other possibilities of that content or presentation being changed, and you were just open of like receiving something else. Which I think is so powerful, especially when it comes to creative work. Which is what a lot of entrepreneurs and speakers, as well as thought leaders like yourself, do. So yeah, that's super inspiring. Thank you.
Thanks for asking the question. Happy to
Yeah.
share.
So if you like could talk a little bit about your own like entrepreneurial journey as a speaker, as a personal brand, like when did that start? Like how long did it take you to like get a website and stuff like that? Because it usually takes a couple of years to people are like, I'm ready to be seen or to be, yeah, to be this, right? So yeah, talk to us a little bit about that.
For sure. Do you know what your human design is, Christian?
Yeah, I'm a manifester.
Straight up manifester, huh? Me too. Cool. So when I got into human design, I had this friend who was doing like human design readings, and he was like, he knew what I did for a living, and the story I'll share with you guys in a moment. And he goes, "Ah, it makes sense. You're a manifester." So here's the thing: back in 2017, I started a podcast, and at the time, yeah, I guess I'll go into that story. My friend and I, Sergio Oliveri, we ran the Silicon Valley Young Professionals together, and we were like Dumb and Dumber, and it was like people would tell us we should have a show. And I was a big fan of Rogan's podcast at the time. And I was like, and he was a big fan of Howard Stern. So he was like, no, Howard Stern basically shits on podcasts. So he hated podcasts because he didn't have a mind for his own, for himself, that's neither here nor there. It took 6 months to convince my friend to do the podcast. Then he finally was like, all right, I'll do it. So he came over to my house one day. This is January 17th, 2017. I don't even know what program we used. Maybe it was QuickTime. And we were just like, we're no microphone, we're no webcam or anything. We were just like, I guess you hit record, and it was like that scene in Zoolander where they're like, it's inside the computer, and they're kind of like, "Hoo, hoo, 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 hoo," and they didn't know how to get the files out of the computer. Like, we didn't know what the heck we were doing. And what do you know? Like 5 episodes later, a couple months later, we were interviewing a Super Bowl champion of the San Francisco 49ers at the KNBR studio. That's the local sports radio show that has a studio at the brand new Levi's Stadium for the San Francisco 49ers. We were then partnered with multiple legit organizations in Silicon Valley, and we had no idea what we were doing. I started listening to podcasts on how to podcast. I went to the podcast national conference, and I was figuring it out as I went along, and it was resonating with people. And I mean, I think by that fifth episode, we actually had legit like production quality. And these days, 7 years later, with AI and so many different tools and podcasting being so much more accessible, like it's way easier to get started and get off the ground. Those days you couldn't even do a Zoom call and record. You would have to do Skype and then download a software called like eCapture or e something, and it was all clunky. Like now it's so easy. But anyways, in doing the podcast, I started to learn how to edit the podcast, and I was like, damn, this is time consuming. This isn't worth it. And I had read Tim Ferriss's book, what is it, 4 Hour Work Week, about 5 years, whatever it was, 5 years previous to that. And I had always wanted to learn to work with virtual assistants, but I never really had a reason. So I was like, all right, I'm going to get a VA and see if the VA can help me with editing the podcast. Well, that turned to not only a virtual assistant for editing the podcast, but creating a website, graphic design, all the things. Within a year or two, people started asking me, hey, how are you able to do so many different things? And I'm like, easy, VAs. And they're like, what's a VA? And I'm like, a virtual assistant. And this is like in Silicon Valley and with people all across the country in the US, but people didn't know what virtual assistants were that I was talking to. And I was like, really? So I wrote an ebook on how to work with VAs. I turned that into my first book, How to Work with VAs. That then became a podcast called Clone Yourself, where in the first 15 episodes, it's basically like a free course, talking people through how to work with VAs. And then that turned into a done for you marketing agency where I have a company called Wizard Teams where we do anything you want done just through our VA team. You just tell us what you want done, we get it done for you. And that was really what helped me, was more than anything, not only focusing on my strengths and outsourcing my weaknesses, but just getting started and realizing I'll figure it out as I go along. Sure, sometimes you want to plan a little bit more, but I think a lot of people never get started because it's paralysis by analysis.
Yeah, very much agree with that. There's a lot of there's a lot of there's this African proverb that says, "You go as far as you can see, and you will see further." You
Mm,
know, and I think a lot of times, we see, I don't know, to the tree line. We're like, yeah, cool, but there's so much more after and behind and beyond, that we don't see. And so, yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful analogy. So
absolutely.
right now, I want to switch gears a little bit. I want you to talk to us a little bit about AI, the future of humanity and technology, because I feel since you have such a great background in Silicon Valley, you still, I assume, are somewhat tapped into that and have a little bit more the finger on the pulse on technology and AI than other people that are on the show. So, yeah, do you have anything to share about that?
Um, I used to say when I lived in Silicon Valley, I used to joke like I'm the least techie millennial in Silicon Valley. And as well, like with AI, I mess around with Chat GPT here and there, but it blows my mind to see what some people are doing with AI. And I'm like, you can do what? And you're doing what? And then not only blows my mind with like the abilities, but it also blows my mind with how out of alignment or out of integrity people are getting for my values of integrity. I was in a course once with a coach teaching coaches how to coach, and he was teaching us how to create a course with AI. And I was just like, "Are you kidding me?" There's just so much you can do, and I think AI is definitely a tool, obviously. And sometimes I wonder if I'm missing the boat on it, but honestly, like the main way I use Chat GPT is I write a sentence and then I copy and paste it in there. I'm like, is this grammatically correct? And I'm like, oh wow, cool, it is. Because I'm really bad with commas and semicolons sometimes. So that's super rudimentary or elementary, and I know there's so much more you can do, but that's pretty much my extent. The other side is my last year was the most challenging year in my life, and that's what really culminated in me writing my latest book, Overcome the Overwhelm. And that was as a result of being in a very, very toxic relationship. And the relationship wasn't toxic. But when she broke up with me via text and blocked me everywhere and blocked me from the pregnancy that I didn't know, all this type of stuff, and the only way we could communicate was email, it was very helpful to write an email and then put it in Chat GPT and say, can you rewrite this with nonviolent communication? And that was a trick that a buddy taught me. And honestly, like that was really helpful. I was already feeling like most of what I had written was pretty nonviolent, but in a very delicate situation like that, it didn't hurt having extra layers. So again, I'm not really your techie AI guy, but those are some tricks that people might not really think about that are pretty helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so powerful, especially, imagine technology being able to mend a relationship and slightly change the timeline and the outcome of a certain situation in that way. I think it's super powerful. And how
Mhm.
cool that your friend reminded you of, yeah, use that. Do this with your emails, which is amazing. So, tell us a little bit about your book.
Yeah, it's called Overcome the Overwhelm. And again, this came about as a process that I developed for myself to overcome the situation I was in. The book is not about what went down and what the situation was, or it's not about me. It's about this 6 step breath process that can help you to access inner peace at any single moment. And this is a culmination of all my research and credentials or certifications and just interest of being a student and looking at things like Dr. Joe Dispenza's book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, which is a fantastic book, but it also felt like it was a scavenger hunt and I had to study it meticulously, and just different things like that, where it's like, there's an easier way. There's the better way you can go about this to make it more accessible. So I kind of took these different approaches and created a roadmap through the 6-step breath process that really allows us to access inner peace in real time. And there's three things to know about this 6-step breath process. The first is that our bodies have a 90-second physiological response when we experience an emotion. And emotions are energy in motion. So when we put this together, it's like, you know what? Instead of being like, I'm going to distract and numb myself from feeling this, I'm going to allow myself to feel this energy, because I know if I can feel it, then it can move through me. So it's like, okay, great, but what do you actually do? And the three themes of the 6-step breath process, because 6 steps can be a lot, is just simply to breathe, feel, and think intentionally. So I'm experiencing this emotion. Let me slow down. Let me come back to my breath. Let me feel this. Let me get curious of what this energy is revealing to me. Let me accept and surrender to it. Then let me think intentionally. And now's the time we can get into positive affirmations and incorporate and integrate new habits as a result of what that energy was revealing to you. So that's a summary of what the 6-step breath process to overcome overwhelm is all about.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think that's super helpful and practical because people need like simple instructions, especially since so much of our reconditioning happens by, you know, reconditioning ourselves like daily, like every hour. Like we need to be reminded. Humans are creatures of habit, and I think simple techniques like yours are super helpful. So we're getting close to the end of the episode. We have a couple more questions, and the next question I would love to ask you about is about your legacy. So, what are 3 words that you want people to know you for after you leave this physical plane?
Um, Integrity, alignment, authenticity.
Beautiful. Those are great words. What are like what is your vision for the new Earth? Whatever you define as the new Earth.
Yeah, I mean, I think the new earth is, in terms of what that can look like, we've touched on a few things in regard to like the way employees are treated in corporations and that they're not slaves to their business. I think that is not right. I think, prioritizing our own mental health above work is most important more than anything else. I do see a breaking of the establishment, meaning like this way that we look at work driving our lives, and with the respect of the devastation caused in the lockdowns of 2020 and even 2021. In my little bubble of reality, I saw a lot of people opening up to like, wow, there's so much more to life other than work. And I thought it was really starting to be like, wow, this is fun. This like, I honestly, my favorite years of my life were 2020 and 2021. And
Wow.
I know that sounds wild, but I embraced it, and I surrendered to it. And I thought, despite all of the devastation, there was a lot of beauty as well, and it gave me a lot of hope of what the new earth could look like. But unfortunately, what it feels like in these past few years is we've gone back to our old ways. And I remember some of your listeners, some people listening to this are going to really agree with this, or they're going to get really fired up and think I'm crazy. But at the time I was like, F it, burn it all down, because I rather go through this now than act like this isn't happening and go back to like a quote unquote normal, and then know that this is happening, this is going to happen, and then we're going to have to go through the abruptness of what this is happening, because we are so much in the thick of it, and it was getting so close to like burning it all down, which would be it was terrifying. And also like it is happening, and it's necessary to happen. At least I believe. Some other people might be like, no, you can enter a new earth without like devastation. And I'm like, I don't believe that. I think it's the phoenix that rises from the ashes. So, for me, not talking physically, burn it all down, but metaphorically, like let it all burn. And that's when the beauty really will come through. And for those of you listening that know what I'm talking about, like you can recall those times that you had, or even maybe you're still having it. I know in my bubble of reality, things have gone a little bit stale and back to the way they have. But that's kind of what I see the new earth being.
Beautiful. Yeah, yeah, I think so too. The COVID era was really just kind of like a little bit like a reset. Everything comes was like slowing down, um, and yeah, I'm curious to see what happens in the next few years. I think it's just more of that transformation, but obviously a little bit slower. Yeah, it's exciting. I think the world is definitely changing though. I think on a collective level, you see a lot of people being interested in breath work, in meditation, in yoga, in this, in that, and I think that is such a vital development of humanity for the next era that's coming.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean that's why we're here. You know what I mean? That's why we record this podcast. Spiritualpreneur. It's not like, make $1 million in spirituality or spirit or whatever that component is in your life is not important. It's like both, right?
Mm-hmm.
Balance. So last question for you is like what do you looking to call in your life, like any future goals, any future aspirations in as your personal brand company, as an entrepreneur yourself, like what are you looking to call in? I always like to give that part of the podcast over to my guest and just like do some visioning for you, like anything that you are excited about calling in more of.
Yeah, for me, I just want to see people replace the words or the phrase work life balance with soul life balance, and not for my own ego. Like it's very much Simon Sinek, he was a big pioneer for start with why or know your why. And a lot of people these days, when it comes to like, well, you got to know your why, right? Like they don't equate that to Simon Sinek. And I don't need my legacy or my name known for soul life balance. I just have a vision of getting rid of this phrase work life balance because it's a bunch of BS, and replacing that with soul life balance. And that's the vision I see.
Beautiful. A ode to that. So, where can people find you? Where can people get more of you? Let us know, how people can get in touch. Yeah,
For sure. Yeah. My website's samkabert.com. There it has all of my links. I'm very active on Instagram. I have a podcast called Soul Seeker and a YouTube channel called Spirituality Simplified, which has educational lessons on spirituality and make it more accessible, along with breathwork exercises and visualizations.
beautiful. Any last words you want to leave the audience with?
Just feel through it.
Just feel beautiful. Thank you so much for your time, Sam. It was such an honor to have you on the show, and let's keep spreading the light.
Sounds great. Thank you, Christian. I appreciate the opportunity.
It's an honor.